This podcast includes information provided by the issuer and does not express the views of the interviewer. This podcast may also include forward-looking statements by the issuer that involve certain risks and uncertainties to its business. Because forward-looking statements are subject to risks and uncertainties, the issuer's actual results could differ from those indicated in this podcast. Welcome to the Planet MicroCap Podcast. I'm your host, Robert Kraft, and thank you all so much for the support and for tuning in. You can follow Planet MicroCap on Twitter at Bobby K. Kraft. That's BOBBYKKRAFT, and you are listening to episode 76. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to tweet at me or shoot me an email at rkraft@SNN.Network. And when you do get a chance, if you like what you hear, please rate and review Planet MicroCap on iTunes. It really helps provide feedback for me and spread the MicroCap message. For this episode of the Planet MicroCap Podcast, I caught up with Chris Lahiji, president of LD Micro. Every year, the microcap investing universe gathers together during the first week of December in Los Angeles to check in with portfolio companies, look for new opportunities, as well as commemorate, celebrate, and network. This year is Chris's 11th annual LD Micro main event, and I would consider the event an institution in our space. We always look forward to each and every year, and we will be there in person, so be sure to say hi. Because we're close to the end of 2018, I also wanted to get Chris's thoughts on 2018, trends he recognized, highlights, lowlights, and he even proposes some structural changes he thinks would incentivize more companies to go public, a common topic discussed for those covering the microcap space. Thank you again for tuning in to episode 76, and I would like to welcome back Chris Lahiji, president of LD Micro, to the program. Chris, welcome back to the Planet MicroCap Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's great to have you on. So to start, for those who may not know, what is your background and a little bit about LD Micro?
Background is that I have been involved in one way or another in microcap since 1996. Started out as an investor, then an analyst, and my entire occupation essentially evolves around providing tools and becoming a good resource for people who are investing in the smallest public companies today.
Cool. So also, again, for those who may not know, tell what is LD Micro and LDmicro.com? What can an investor expect when they go onto your website?
LDmicro.com serves several functions. One, it is the home to the LD Micro Index, which is, in our eyes, the most accurate indicator of what all the microcap companies are doing as a whole composite. It's also a place where you can get data on all the biggest gainers, the biggest losers, the most active in volume, as well as sectors. And lastly, it's a place where you can do more research using our screener, and it is, from our understanding, the only live news feed in the space. So when people ultimately go to ldmicro.com, they'll check a few quotes, they'll look at the index, they'll take a look at the top news of the day, and slowly but surely, it is becoming more and more prevalent for investors and analysts and bankers and anyone who is ultimately involved with small public companies.
Right. So then, as someone who's following the space on a daily basis, just like us, in your opinion, what do you say has been going on thus far in 2018 in the microcap space?
I think that we have not, at least from our end, seen as much interest in this category for what feels like 10 or 11 years. And you essentially have two things going on. You have a lot of companies that have been kind of aggressive in their expansions, and they're raising money either privately or through pipes and things of that nature. And then you have a large category of companies that have also said, you know what, I think we've taken this as far as we could. We're looking to ultimately merge with another company, get bought out, or delist. So I think this interview that we're having today is relatively timely because last week, at least for us, I mean, I don't know of any organization that basically kind of is keeping data on this segment. So by default, we have to. But I can't remember any week in my life, at least until 1996, where 5 companies, 4 of which we owned personally, 5 companies either merged or got bought out in a single week. So you kind of have, very weird, it's not a dichotomy, but it's just a very weird situation with companies that are looking to expand and then companies that are looking to get taken out. Mm-hmm. And for anyone who has spent any time on the website, right now we essentially follow 12,000 microcaps in North America. And a very small subset of them are what we call active, or companies on the prowl. They're going to events, they're looking to get coverage, things of that nature. There's a lot of dark space in this world, and what we've also found interesting is that companies that really haven't spoken to anyone in the last few years are now slowly kind of going on the grid, as we call it, and wanting to make a name for themselves. Mm-hmm. So it's net. It's been positive, but recently, the index is down for the year because of a pretty rough October, and guys are trying to just find their footing as to how they're going to set up for 19.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, like, what are you seeing as what is kind of the plan for 2019? Because it's such a weird, interesting, and I don't want to say one way or another type of time in our space, because there's always an opportunity if you've seen these things before, but with all these mergers and acquisitions and all these different things happen, it's almost like the last week was a microcosm of what's been going on the whole year.
I have a very specific game plan. Mm-hmm. And that is essentially identifying things that are trading at 40 to 50 cents on the dollar that really haven't had a lot of news in the last year. Mm-hmm. And I'll give you 2 examples of this. Intersections, INTX, which was bought out for about 145% premium. Now, granted, the stock had been down. It opened up at 17 a few years ago, and it went all the way down to about $1.30. And then something like a Nuvo, where the stock had absolutely been crushed. At one time, a Nuvo was one of my largest personal holdings. So you have this. My gut tells me that there are a lot of companies out there, like a Nuvo, like Intersections, that are just kind of looking for another recourse, given that they don't feel like anyone is going to value the company for what they're actually worth. And now is essentially a pretty auspicious time to sell the company, given the fact that there is just so much money chasing so many things. Mm-hmm. My logic is that there's so much money sloshing around, that some of it is finally ending up in microcap, mm-hmm. which is why you're seeing as many buyouts and mergers and things of that nature. So this is something that is very difficult to gauge naturally, mm-hmm. But I feel that there's enough companies out there that are on nobody's radar screens that would make wonderful acquisitions for certain companies. Mm-hmm. One of our largest holdings right now that surprises a lot of people is Kodak. Mm-hmm. And with Kodak, it was, if you told me 20 years ago that I would own as much Kodak as I did, I would tell you that I'm either, a billionaire investor, or Kodak is, a relatively inexpensive company to own. And the average market cap, the average at least purchase price that we made for Kodak was roughly $130 million, for the entire business. And Kodak is probably one of the most, one of the companies that is just, there's really no coverage. Everyone assumes that it's going to go bankrupt. No one feels that there's a business. But if you look very carefully as to all the divisions that they own, if you look at the earnings report they had on Friday, if you kind of read the tea leaves and say, look, we're looking to sell this company, or sell divisions of this company, they publicly announced this, you could very quickly see that the sum of the parts for Kodak are worth much more than whatever the stock is trading at today. Mm-hmm. So if I could own 100 Kodaks, I would. Mm-hmm. Because, they've kind of disclosed that they're looking to unlock value. The company is significantly undervalued relative to its assets, and they have their debt under control. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of our focus. It's like how many Kodaks can we find? Mm-hmm. Another name that I don't think gets really any love, and I've been a longtime shareholder of it, is a company called Dynatronics. The ticker symbol is DYNT. And for full disclosure, we own it, just like Kodak, and they come to the event, our invitational in June. But Dynatronics, what makes this fascinating is that, again, the sum of the parts are worth much more than the whole, and they're creating shareholder value. There's a new management team there that is active in kind of building a business, and the results are starting to showcase themselves. So, I would much rather be early to the train station than late.
So, and also just for full clarification, are you still currently a shareholder in Intersections INTX and Innovo INUV?
I am a shareholder of INUV. I am not a shareholder in INTX at this moment.
Got it. So, another thing that you've talked about on here a couple times and we've brought up is this idea of, new names coming into the space and, it being more companies going public as a microcap. One thing I think a lot of people always thought with, change in the guard and cutting of the red tape that, more of that might happen. I'd love to hear your update on where you think, things are going on that front.
It's still, there's a lot of very intelligent people doing good things to create a much more vibrant community for microcap. But I think a lot of it is still, it's still kind of on hold, given how easy it is to raise the money as a private company. Mm-hmm. So as long as you kind of have that dynamic, mm-hmm. You're not gonna see a lot of companies go public. Mm-hmm. And I also believe that on the regulatory side, it's still very strict. If they showcase some leniency, tax credits, things of that nature, there's still no real massive catalyst to get anyone to go public. Mm-hmm. So until that happens, there's companies going public again, which is nice. But for us to really have a halo effect, there still has to be structural changes that need to be made, in my opinion. But the good news is there's been a few companies that have come public this year where, they're fantastic stories. Mm-hmm. It'll be interesting to see which ones fully develop and which ones ultimately make money for shareholders.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Chris, just to kind of brainstorm, let's pretend, you had the ear of some Washington, D.C. lawmakers. What would be those structural changes you'd like to see that you think would catalyze more companies going public as microcaps?
Of course I'm biased, of course. But I would basically structure something where you need, in this case, just less cost for going public. Just the entire process from accounting to auditing to legal to all that stuff. It should be much easier. Okay, and the other thing that I would say, and I know this sounds crazy, of course, but I would give tax incentives to those companies or tax credits to those companies who essentially are below a certain size that are public. And I think that this basically allows this allows profitable companies that generate millions of dollars in revenue to have a new source or a new catalyst to go public because they will be paying less in taxes. But in tune, they will hopefully use some of that money or that savings to build even bigger companies.
Gotcha.
And then finally, which sounds really ridiculous, but there should be tax breaks for small company investors as well. You know, if you're willing to bet on the riskiest part of the market, I also feel that there should be a different tax rate for it. So in this case, you know, instead of 30 or 35 or whatever the number is, you would only be paying 10 to 15 if the companies that you made money are less than 300 million, 400 million, 500 million, etc.
I think. Sorry, I cut you off. I was going to say, I mean, that would, man, I can only imagine if that were to...
Well, you wanted a big catalyst. This is as big as it gets.
That is. Yeah.
I mean, what is the real cost? What is the real cost to the government for something like this? A couple $2 billion, but how much job creation would it have? How much investment would flow in? You know, they'll be making money on other. You know, it sounds ridiculous, but it's still a relatively small segment of the market. You know, so it's possible to do something niche, but you know, if I had any dream position on this, I would definitely have cheaper for companies to go public, more tax credits or tax incentives for those who invest.
Also, I have to ask, you know, for 2018, you know, what's been, I mean, we all know that cannabis has been nuts and, you know, earlier in the year it was blockchain and whatnot, you know. So I'd love to reflect with you on that. You know, what have you seen in terms of sectors that just were, you know, that were interesting this year, not interesting, maybe didn't get as much love as they probably should have? You know, what have you been seeing?
Well, the one segment that's absolutely been on fire has been med tech, cancer testing, diagnostic testing. I mean, look at you know, companies that basically do something. They sell tools in this space. Look at BioLife Solutions. Look at Cryoport. Look at NeoGenomics.
Wait, full disclosure, do you own those?
What's that?
Full disclosure, do you own any of those names?
Cryoport we do not. NeoGenomics we do not, and BioLife we do. BioLife we do not at the moment.
Okay. Sorry.
So, yeah. So I was a shareholder, but we don't have any positions in these companies right now. I mean, just look at these charts over the last year or two. They've been on fire. So MedTech very secretly has been a segment that's done very well in the microcap world.
Cool. So, you know, now I want to segue into, you know, this is your big event of 2018. Not to say the Invitational isn't a huge event, because it is quite big and a really great event. But, you know, the main event, this is now your 11th year. Tell me, what can we expect and look forward to for this year's conference? Well, the title is Unfinished Business. We're looking at between 245 and 260 names. We feel that it is the best assortment of companies we've ever had. We've had the blessing of being extra picky because over 400 companies have already told us that they want to attend, and we don't really have the spots. So when you have that luxury, you can kind of pick and choose who you want. And we've been very, very fortunate to do this again. So I think I'm just hoping that we get a chance to have our conference without fires or earthquakes or, you know, man-eating locusts or whatever is probably out there on the horizon. You know, we're going to have our take is 90% plus people come back every year. So as long as you have that, you want to make sure that, you know, you're doing everything you can where people are learning and having a great time. And that's the key to the success for any event. Just that, you know, can people learn? Can people, grow? Can people laugh?
And if you can do those three things, I think you'll be successful. The problem is no one could learn, grow, and last when there is when the hillside's on fire. That was the opposite emotion that we were looking for. And as far as I'm concerned, I think that this event sets investors and analysts and sponsors. This event sets up better for 19 than any other conference, because it's kind of the last look at 18, and then what am I going to be buying or analyzing in 19? So we're excited, but like with anything, there's only so many things that we can control, and we try not to worry about the things that we can't.
Right. And just to quickly mention, when it comes to, not just the fires from last year, but also this year, we really, our thoughts and prayers, if I can speak on behalf of you, Chris, go out to everybody that has been affected by the Camp Fire and the Woolsey Fire. And we're very thankful to all of our firefighters, men and women in uniform that are out there helping everybody on the front lines. And Chris, if you want to say something as well to that, I'm sure you.
I mean, what they're doing is a very thankless job, and this is a systemic issue for the state. And it's true that we haven't had rain in a long time, and it's true that California is naturally in, an arid, desert climate. But what we're seeing is unprecedented, and I don't think the media or television images do justice to the amount of carnage that these fires have caused, in terms of loss of life, in terms of properties being destroyed, in terms of how pervasive they are, and what a negative impact it has on the local and state community. I mean, these things the ramifications will be there for years to come. So my take is, if anyone from the state government is listening to this, and they're probably not, they should double the size of CAL FIRE, and they should basically have a Manhattan Project for tech companies to kind of figure out new ways of fighting this. Because the antiquated ways, we don't have enough manpower, we don't even have enough water to fight this. There has to be a big change, and I'm hoping that in the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years' time, it's safer for the firefighters to combat this, and they're much more effective in the way they take on fires. So to say that we haven't been impacted, it was a hard decision we've ever made, but it was the right decision, and I'm glad we did it. But for a lot of people, they don't have that option because their house is gone. So I commend them. We donated last year to several organizations that fight fires. We'll donate this year. They need all the help they can get.
Absolutely. And yeah, no, that's a really good sentiment. And behalf of everybody, my audience and everyone here, thank you for doing that. We hope to see a swift end to everything very, very shortly. But again, getting back to, our interview here when it comes to microcap investing and our excitement for the main event, I have one fun question for you that I haven't asked you in a while. And I think, this will bring a little bit more, a little bit of levity and Chris, what can you give us maybe one, you're famous for telling some great stories, can you give us one fun investing story that really helped shape your investing thesis over the years?
One fun story, I can't remember the gentleman's name or the company. It was a gold company, and it was probably the most famous presentation ever given at LD Micro. The guy had 5 slides, and the first 3 were the same one. It basically started, it would have the company's name, and it says, the first slide is, that Reg A, Reg FD thing, that, forward-looking statements, and then page 2 is, we are a profitable gold mine. And then the other slide was, I repeat, profitable gold mine. And then the last slide was like, we make money, legitimately. And then finally, it's like, any questions? Yeah. For whatever reason, that presentation was by far and away the most discussed 25 minutes anyone has ever had. And what's crazy is he had questions for the other 20-some-odd minutes. So, I should know the name. I should know the executive. They're out of I believe out of Salt Lake City, Utah. But I thought that was one of the more memorable moments where you don't really have to say much to get a lot of attention if you say the right things.
Right.
So I think that he touched a nerve on people, and it was wonderful to see. So a positive nerve, if you will.
By the way, I also have to ask, in terms of, I know you like to keep this a surprise sometimes, but do you have any panels or speakers or special keynotes coming in?
Well, listen, we're honored that people typically copy all our panels for the rest of the year. So we basically have set up panels and keynotes this year that if you copy, then you're nuts. So just there's one panel in particular that I'm not going to be discussing. It's actually on the agenda on ldmicro.com for the main event. But I think that may be the most controversial panel anyone has ever done in this business. So it's kind of pushing the envelope. It's I love our keynotes this year. Again, I can't really talk about it because I always keep it private. But that's part of the fun of coming. You really don't know who to expect.
Right. All right, Chris. So then, for more information on LD Micro and to register, registration is still open, correct?
Registration is, you have to essentially ping us on the website and give us a good reason that we should consider you for admission. Just like most colleges in this country, the acceptance rate has gone down over the years because we only have a finite amount of space at the Lux Sunset. So, it's the thing is, how do you enhance the community that we have or the community we've built? We're really kind of focusing on that. If a guy basically comes to us and says, I have a lot of money and I make a lot of investments, there's a high probability that those are the only two things he's probably not getting in. So maybe other conferences, but not here. We have to kind of feel that, every edition enhances the community so much more than just one person.
And everybody should go to ldmicro.com?
Yes, ldmicro.com is still the site until LD Micro, these fast-growing Singaporean tech company, buys us out. So, we're fortunate to have that domain name. I actually tried to buy ld.com, but the dude wanted 7 figures, and I don't have 7 figures to pay a domain name. So, you're gonna still have to type that LD Micro. I know it's an extra second, but I think it's worth it.
Well, Chris, man, thanks again for joining me today. I'm very excited for the main event, and as always, really, really do appreciate you sharing your thoughts.
My pleasure, and thank you again, and I appreciate everyone listening in today.
Thank you. Thank you all for tuning in to the Planet MicroCap Podcast, and thank you, Chris, again for coming on to the program. You can access the podcast by going on to stocknewsnow.com under podcast, go to podbean.com and search Planet MicroCap Podcast, or on iTunes and search Planet MicroCap Podcast. Stay tuned for the next Planet MicroCap Podcast, where we'll have our next guest to discuss all things microcap. If you have any questions or comments about the podcast, please send an email to info@SNN.Wire.com. I'd love to hear from all of you. This podcast has been brought to you by SNN Incorporated, publishers of StockNewsNow.com, the official microcap news source, and the MicroCap Review magazine. I'm your host, Robert Kraft, and thank you again for joining me on the Planet MicroCap Podcast. Have a great week, everyone.